Okay, welcome to today's Dangerous, Affected and Insanitary Buildings Policy Review Deliberation Agenda. And I'd like to thank Councillor Bob Mugford and all the staff for attending. And yesterday we obviously had the hearings and we had 2 submitters, which was fantastic to hear from them. So we'll like to start with an opening karakia. Bob, would you like to lead us in this? Okay, thanks, Bob. Te hau ki te uru, whakatakata, tau ki te tonga, kia mā kinekine, kia utu, kia mā taratara, kia tai, e he ake ana te atakura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu, te hei mori ora. Brilliant, thanks, Bob. Do we have any apologies for today? So that's none noted. Conflicts of interest? No conflicts of interest. Confirmation of the minutes from the hearings held on the 5th of June.
Also move.
Move, and a seconder? Yep, thank you. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Right, let's move on to the deliberations report. Okay, we hand this over to you, Vanessa, if you'd like to lead us through anything that's we've got in front of us.
Okay, in terms of the report, we'll leave the recommendations to the end, but obviously the background to this is that Council every 5 years needs to review its dangerous, affected and insanitary policy. So the statement of proposal went to Council on the 19th of February. We've now had the hearings and today we'll deliberate on all the submissions that have been received. In terms of Council's significance policy, it's identified as of low importance, and not that it's not important, it's quite an important piece of legislation that we work with and it needs to be carefully handled. And it's one of the only things under the Building Act that we have to run through the special consultative process. So in terms of the submissions, you've all read those and we've had the opportunity to hear from 2 of the submitters in person yesterday. There's some stats there in the report. 116 people visited the site while the campaign was up, and a total of 11 submissions were received. Really pleased with the quality and content of some of those submissions. They're really going to add value to the policy that we put forward. Key themes. So a real preference for proactive and preventative approach over reactive work from Council. Typically most of what we see at the moment is reactive through complaints arising from the public, and I think we can do more with our staff to try and be more proactive in the future. There was quite an emphasis in some of the submissions on support agencies and funding support for people that are in the position of facing a dangerous or insanitary building. A lot of those people tend to be vulnerable in our community, so we need to make sure we've got the right mechanisms in place to wrap some support around them from the correct agencies, and also value the heritage nature of buildings if they fall into that category. Some of the requests were around clearer policy language, which is always a bit of a challenge because a lot of what we're doing is direct from the legislation. So at the likes of definitions for what dangerous and insanitary mean, we've taken those directly from the legislation. We don't want to be trying to change those. I appreciate they are challenging, and it's how we wrap some guidance around them, I think, on our website and public information to ensure that they're easier to understand for the public. Some quite strong submissions from Heritage New Zealand and also Health New Zealand in regard to multi-agency approaches and making sure that we've got that well documented in the policy. And in terms of funding implications, I guess overall Council are required to react to these things. It does come out of the rates for us to respond to that, but we're dealing with a very small number of incidents each year as well. Right, and I think probably now, if it's all right with you, Councillor Munt, is I have got some suggestions for changes in the policy, which I'm happy to put on screen, and if we work through the various submissions
Yep.
on where they've come from.
Yep, sure.
Right. So if we work through the submissions one by one, submitter number one, unfortunately, while they wanted to be heard, didn't come and talk yesterday. So they were urging council to consider implementing a more proactive and accountable enforcement strategy, especially in situations where ongoing issues have been allowed to go unchecked. Given we haven't been able to query and delve into what they were after a bit more, that is a wee bit challenging. Submitter number 4, Bradley Mannering, provided some really robust amendment clauses and suggestions to go into the policy. So if we work through his amendments, Amendment 1, which talks to added protections for misuse of the policy, what I've done is proposed we add a new clause 12 into the document, which looks at protections, transparency and awareness. Essentially, I've taken his full text verbatim because it's extremely well written, and that forms the first paragraph there.
Excellent. Should we read that out loud? Is that worth doing?
Yep, can do. So it reads, Council will take all reasonable steps to ensure that this policy is not used inappropriately or maliciously. Investigations initiated through the complaints process must be assessed for credibility and substance prior to enforcement action, particularly where complaints may be strategic, vexatious or made in bad faith.
Yep, absolutely. That's fantastic. There's nothing that needs to be added to give some structure to how we will appropriate this?
I think quite rightly we do need to have some guidance for staff and that to follow in terms of establishing when a complaint is vexatious, whether that sits within the policy or is guidance outside of that in our standard operating procedure, I think would probably be the better place to put it.
Okay, fantastic. So the second paragraph is that this policy shall not be used to exert de facto control over buildings or land where the council has no clear statutory authority, including land under treaty settlement, crown ownership or disputed title, unless jurisdiction is confirmed.
Yes, that's correct. That's his wording as well, albeit I've left out he had stated legally confirmed. The reason we've left the word legally out is people would interpret that as requiring to be determined in the court.
Yeah.
And for ownership, we should be able to use things like certificates of title and that to actually confirm that and only go to court in exceptional circumstances.
Okay. And council will promote public awareness of building safety and maintenance best practices, including education campaigns aimed at early prevention of dangerous and insanitary conditions. I think that's fantastic to have that added in for our procedural measures.
Sorry, I'm just...
That's fine.
Yep, definitely. Amendment 3 proposed by the submitter, I have added in a new section 9 which talks to multi-agency coordination. So both the statements he's provided, council will provide guidance, support and, where applicable, access to funding mechanisms, e.g. rates relief, heritage grants to assist owners in remedying issues. And in the case of hardship, council will consider extended compliance timeframes or support services to avoid disproportionate impact on vulnerable individuals or property owners. The submitter had small property owners. I actually think we're better to be inclusive and go all property owners.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Amendment number 4 proposed by the submitter talked to an annual public report will be issued summarising the number of buildings assessed, notices issued, appeals lodged and resolutions achieved under this policy. Any concerns of disproportionate use or patterns of potential misuse will be addressed. So I agree that is something that we should be doing.
Absolutely.
It is going to take us a little bit of work just to develop a mechanism to accurately capture the data for that report, because not all the complaints we investigate under the policy end up having a notice issued.
Yep, certainly.
And then amendment number 5 was the public awareness piece, which was just above there. Council will promote public awareness of building safety, maintenance, best practices, including education campaigns aimed at early prevention of dangerous and insanitary conditions. So it's something we've done a little bit of in the past, using council call and other mechanisms to promote basic maintenance for people on their houses, and I think it's something we should continue to do and have a bit more of a focus towards when things become or start heading in the direction of insanitary or dangerous.
Yep, fantastic. And noting that we only had 11 looks on council call, we might need to extend our scope of how we're getting that information out to the wider public.
Yeah, I think we need to maximise the use of our website as well. When we use council call, that article goes out once in a seasonal time, and then it's gone. If we keep things on our website, they're always there for people to reference.
Would it be worth putting an amendment in there, council will promote more widely, or do you think that's not required? Or promote widely?
Yeah, we'll promote widely. Happy to do that.
That just gives us the directive to make sure we don't just put it on the website.
Absolutely.
Yep, great.
All good. So then if we move to submitter number 7, because 5 and 6 didn't provide any real statements. Submitter number 7 was Sam Wiltshire that we heard from yesterday. Mm-hmm. He spoke a lot to deferred maintenance, which ties into the public awareness of building safety issues and maintenance campaigns that we've just looked at. And one of the other things I picked up from him yesterday was the definitions, and in particular potable water. So where we talk about what a dangerous building is, I've added a note here and included the definition of potable water from the Building Act.
Right, okay. So complies with the drinking water standards. At the moment, there is some uncertainty around whether that will eventually lead into private property wells. So that could create, I guess, down the road, an additional issue here, because there's an awful lot of private property wells. Mm-hmm. Is this a requirement by law that we're required to have water included in the sanitary buildings, or have we chosen as a council to put that in?
No, so if we read the insanitary building piece above, which is the italic words are directly from section 123 of the Act, point C is does not have a supply of potable water that is adequate for its intended use.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's no chance of taking water out. It is what it is.
No,
Yep.
and it's there for a very good reason. If you don't have safe sanitary water to drink and use for personal hygiene, you're going to make yourself or your family sick.
Oh, absolutely. I guess we've just been looking at the chlorinated, non-chlorinated argument for a little while now. So we'll see what happens in the future over that one.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Just with the water, in the rural water schemes, probably 50% of the houses on those haven't got what the council consider 3 days of water storage. Is that something that we could put in with that, because these places become insanitary if they run out of water, which they're doing all the time?
It's an interesting one, because under the Building Act there's not a requirement for 3 days supply. Okay, so the building code itself only covers off water volumes for the likes of rest homes and that they have to have stored on site, not for individual properties. So it really becomes a civil defence emergency management type scenario, that it's best practice for rural property owners to ensure they've got a supply so that in any event they can look after themselves for a period of time.
Yeah, no, it seems to be a major problem in our area, and we've advertised it several times, and it doesn't seem to change.
Yeah, it's probably something we could, through the public information campaign, really push a bit more to make people more aware of the risks of not having sufficient water storage for themselves.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
I'll now move to submission number 9, that was Melbourne Community Board. So they were looking for some key changes to be added into section 2, just some headers to those paragraphs, so it was really clear what the 3 different approaches would be to identifying dangerous, affected and sanitary buildings. And I just see that as an improvement to the wording overall.
So so in terms of any changes here, have we changed some of the words, because you've got in red but the rest is not italic or red, so what changes have we made?
Just added in those words in red.
Oh, okay. Preventative engagement. Yep. Compliant driven response. And proactive monitoring. Okay. Right. So the compliant driven response, obviously, the complaint. It's not compliance, it's complaint. My eyes are playing tricks on me. Complaint driven response. No, that's fine. Yep. Because we've already tackled that issue around vexatious in the former wording.
Yes, yep, we have. So the submission was quite well worded and quite a lot of detail in it in terms of different text changes that they'd like to see made. A number of them I have included. So if we go to section 4, sorry, let's drive this. So in the final paragraph, the bullet points, they were looking for some changes around age and condition. So I've added that in. They had some suggested rewording of things like the second bullet point, how many people spend time in or near the building. They were looking to have that changed to the number of people who occupy or visit the building or its surrounds. My preference is to leave the wording as is, because we have used wording which comes from regulations in another part of the Building Act, and just having some consistency of those words is easier for our staff to interpret.
Okay.
The next one, expected useful life. I have made the suggested changes that Melvin put forward. The only thing I haven't included in that sentence is they said and will extend its life. Purposely haven't used the word extend because that has a different context under the Building Act.
Okay. But we do have prolong its life, which is literally the same. So
yes, yeah, but under the Building Act there is a section where you can extend the life of a building that's got a specified intended life.
And it's different to the word prolonging the life.
From the perspective of the Act, if we put extend, people could interpret that we're applying a section that actually doesn't apply.
Okay.
Because the building doesn't have a specified intended life.
Right, okay, thank you. Yep, sorry, Bob?
In number 5, you've got council may obtain expert advice. Who actually pays for that?
Sorry, number 5 under...
No,
to be supplied at the owner's expense.
He's on identifying dangerous. No, so what page? Is that page 2? Just on our list at page 2 of our report.
So just section 5 on screen there, point C. If we do request reports from other parties for expertise, they're to be supplied at the owner's cost.
Okay. Yep, thank you.
So just going back to the bullet points from Melvin, the other recommendations that they'd put forward have been included there as well, in terms of the practicality and proportionality of any work required.
Sorry, where are we at? I missed that. Have we gone back up to the red?
Yes.
So the practicality and proportionality of any work required. Can you just speak to that a little bit? Because that is where I think we don't have the plain English definition so evident in that particular line.
Yeah, so originally it was reasonable practicality. Under the Building Act, reasonably practical is a common term for us in the industry, but I appreciate it's not so clear for the public. So the Melbourne Community Board had spoken to changing that to practicality and proportionality. So when you look at the practicality, is something practical to actually do?
Yeah.
There will be situations where it's not practical to repair a building because it's too far dilapidated.
Yes.
Proportionality, you've got to look at the cost and that associated with the work as well. How much work do you get somebody to do if a building's close to the end of its life? Because they could end
Would the plain English, instead of having proportionality, would you not then simply put the cost analysis of any work required, or something along those lines? I mean, because proportionality, it could be, it's quite a wide scope. I think different people who are not in the industry would potentially read something different out of that.
Yep, could absolutely
Do you
change that.
Do you have any suggestions now that you're in here for plain English? Proportionality meaning the cost benefit of any work required. I mean, that would be the term I would put if I was writing this.
We are on. So my question would just be back to Vanessa, whether proportionality, whether cost was the only thing that was considered by that term, if there were any other factors that we would consider make the recommended work not proportional other than cost.
Potentially there would be other factors. It's very difficult because every investigation that we do like this is very much case by case. Every situation that we go into is different. So yeah, sometimes it's cost, sometimes it's the condition of the building. There are a raft of things that it could be. I'm not going to die on that hill, but I feel if we're giving this to a vulnerable homeowner to look over, I think they could get very stuck on identifying what that's meaning. And I think it would be nice to have a bit more plain English in this. The practicality and the overall benefit of any work required. Or can we have a line, proportionality / overall benefit?
I wondered if you're wanting to sort of demystify the words, perhaps even reverting back to reasonableness of any work required, because the thing that I'm questioning is taking away discretion in these circumstances. So like Vanessa was talking about the types of situations, they're many and varied, and if you're changing the words in a way that sort of restricts that discretion that Vanessa and her team can use, that means that it might not apply to whatever situation that they're coming across. So even though I understand the intention behind the recommended suggestion from the submitter, I think if they're recommending a change which is making it confusing from your perspective, if you consider that it's confusing, then I think we need to go back to what the original
reasonable.
Because that's the intent behind it, isn't it? It's reasonableness, which can be in the discretion of the...
So we've already had reasonable at the start there, Vanessa, but you had a line through it.
Yeah, that's deleted from the previous. So it's really whether you want the reasonable first or practicality first.
I'd go to the original, reasonable and practicality of any work required. Will you agree, Bob?
Yes.
Yep, Bob agrees with that.
Sorry, because I've deleted it out previously,
Sure.
I've got to add it back in just with track changes on.
So reasonable and practicality, is that it? Reasonable and
So you
practicality.
could say reasonable practicality or reasonableness and practicality.
I think just reasonable and practicality to me reads better.
Oh, so it would be reasonableness because it's a noun instead of an adjective, yeah. Sorry.
We're getting into the long now.
Nice.
I'll stay out of the weeds.
Reasonableness. What are we really aiming for? Plain English. Okay.
All good. All right, so that concludes section 4 from Melvin's.
Can I add one more thing? We've got any special historical cultural value of the building. Do we need to put in additionally whether listed heritage or not? Because obviously we've got a lot of heritage buildings that are not listed, and the owners don't want them listed because they don't want to then they may wish to retain the character, but they also wish to be able to do unlimited work to them. It would just be nice to know that we're not only protecting listed heritage or considering listed heritage.
No, that's absolutely worth adding in there.
Yep, great.
So just saying whether heritage listed under the district plan or not. Or there are other types of heritage listing.
No, it is under the district plan, you're quite right. And that is also covered in the Heritage New Zealand section later on. Perfect.
Fantastic.
So then if we move on to section 8 was the next part that Melvin had comments on. And this comes down to the interactions with building owners. So the parts in red in the first paragraph where appropriate action may also be undertaken under the Health Act.
Sorry, are we still with Melvin or are we? Yep.
Yeah, we're halfway down on page 16 of the agenda. Sorry, of the submission documents.
Submission documents.
So page 2 of 4 of Melvin's submission.
We've probably not got those. Oh, 2 of 4? Yes. Okay, sorry.
That's all right. In the second paragraph, they'd proposed rewording as well. And I have taken their word verbatim, other than they had said council may proceed to take formal action. I've actually left that as will because we don't have a choice under the Act. We have to take action.
Are we able to just read through everything, because I haven't got it in front of me with the changes, and I just would like to go through the whole thing.
Sure. So if I read from the top of section 8, before exercising its powers, council will seek to discuss options for action with owners on a mutually acceptable approach. This will lead to a formal proposal from the owners for dealing with dangerous, affected or insanitary situations, or where appropriate, action may also be taken under the Health Act 1956. Where discussions do not result in a mutually acceptable approach and proposal, council will proceed to formal action under section 124 of the Building Act.
Do we need to put a time clause in that? Because that sounds like an immediate action if you have a bad roundtable meeting or a bad phone call.
So timeframes was something that were discussed a bit yesterday by submitters, and it's really hard to put hard and fast timeframes on. The Act sets a few minimum timeframes, but not maximums.
Yep.
And in section 7, we've got our priority assessment table that we run through. So if we receive a complaint, we look at what is the seriousness based on the level of risk and the consequences of failure. That gives us an output which tells us how many days we need to respond within.
Yes. But I was thinking more in terms of once you've started interactions with the building owners, if you have one bad meeting, a building owner doesn't want to go into a panic thinking that a discussion that didn't result immediately in a mutual acceptable approach immediately goes into formal action. I think we need to indicate that we will try multiple approaches using the multiple other streams that we've put in this document, and as a last resort we will proceed to take formal action. I think that needs to be somewhere as a last resort, or something to indicate that this isn't our straightaway go-to compliance effort.
Sure. So do you think if we say we're ongoing
Yes.
discussions?
Yep, thank you.
to not result in a mutually acceptable approach?
Mm-hmm.
Because it wouldn't be that we would naturally jump straight to.
Yeah, absolutely, but just read like that. Yep. Can we put in there last resort? Because this is the final leg, is to take formal action.
What are your thoughts on last resort, Sophie? That's
I think I'd probably be reluctant to put that in there. You know, if you had a situation where the building owner was saying, oh no, I think there's still an opportunity here to agree, but we had really tried everything.
But that's still, if we've really tried everything, that still is our last resort.
Yes, but the owner could say, well, you're not, it's not the last resort because I think there's still an option, but we might disagree. So I think if you add that in, then that's another point in which they could challenge our action. So I would suggest against that. I think the ongoing discussions does address the spirit of what you're after and saying that it's not done. It is, we will have ongoing attempts to resolve the issue.
and it might be best we place some more guidance around what those ongoing discussions look like, and when we get to
Yep.
that enforcement in our SOP for staff.
What about, we've got council will, what about may determine to?
I was just saying, council can.
Yeah, because I think will implies that that is again an immediate course of action, that is a predetermined that that's definitely the route we're going to take. So Bob and I both agree that it should come out and be replaced with something that it's on the cards, but it's not a given.
Just put can instead of will.
So my view would be that we need to leave it as will, because the Act requires us to take steps. There are options within that part, but we have to do one or many of those steps that are there.
Okay, so we couldn't put may determine to.
I think you're right there. If the legislation says that we will, then I think we need to keep that wording in there as well.
Okay. Nathan's got his hand up. Nathan, sorry.
Yeah, I was just reiterating what Sophie was saying, that the Act says must in some cases for issuing notices. So
I
may
actually
would
prefer.
give the wrong impression to
Yep.
to the public.
I actually prefer must over will, because will implies that that's the effect we want to take as a council, but must implies that we're under the legislation requires us to do that.
Yep. Okay.
Thanks, Nathan. That was great.
We're
We've
happy-
changed it.
Happy to change that to must.
Must.
Oops. Okay. Happy to move on from that point. So the next part, where parties other than the building owner have access to the building, e.g. tenants, workers or general public, council will act without delay to protect public safety. The owner will be kept fully informed throughout the process. So that was largely same as what Melvin had put forward.
Yeah.
And then moving into the next part, where they had a few changes they were looking for as well. Council recognises that exercising these powers requires careful judgment to ensure the right balance is struck to address safety issues, but also be mindful of other relevant considerations, including but not limited to the practicality of continuing to occupy a building versus the need for immediate evacuation. The cost of short-term disruption arising from the evacuation of a building may be greater than the longer-term danger. The feasibility of addressing issues over an extended period of time dependent on the specific circumstances. The potential economic impacts of any actions required. And judgment concerning the cultural, historic or heritage significance of the buildings.
Brilliant. Happy with that, Bob?
Yep.
Nathan? Good. Yep.
Excellent. Over the page 3 of Melvin's submission, a lot of this ties into the submission that we've had from Heritage New Zealand. And if we can defer that to when we look
Yes.
at the Heritage New Zealand one, that would be
Yep,
great.
that's fine.
And then I'm just looking for section 9. Did we change here? Multi-agency. So they had a paragraph there, paragraph 5, support for building owners. and I think we've covered that fairly well now in this new section 9, which talks to multi-agency coordination. And I'll probably read that out when we talk to the health
Sure.
submission, if that's
Yep.
okay.
That's fine.
One thing which I thought is worth a bit of a discussion, and it comes back to this assessment criteria. We heard from both submitters yesterday that they didn't think the assessment criteria was clear. Now, I wonder what your thoughts are. From my perspective, it is a tool for our team to determine how quickly they need to respond to an issue. So we've got the tables, table 1 being the definition of what the risk or likelihood is, and then the definitions of the consequences of failure.
I was going to say something that obviously we have with the earthquake buildings is we have allowable limits of people. Mm-hmm. Do we have anything to guide us? Because if you go, sorry, if you can scroll it again to the shops. So we've got high. Oh, back to that one. Yeah, high, assessed regularly by small groups of people. You might have a very small shop in which only the courier driver comes into, for example, versus a dairy that maybe has 150 people a day. Do we have any indication if we base it on an earthquake or anything else, or is that too difficult because it depends on what the criteria of the property is and what the issue is?
I guess we haven't aligned this to earthquake as such because the consequences are quite different.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've tried to keep these descriptions at a fairly high level. Mm-hmm. So your example of 2 different shops, they would simply both fall into the high category.
Yeah, okay.
Because
That's
it's not always known to us what the frequency of occupation is in there.
So that couldn't be added in as under... so medium could be also could be just a place which there is a very low frequency. Mm-hmm. Because if we're putting in only where a courier driver's turning up to a small business to pick up, I don't know, boxes of mushrooms or something, it'd be terrible for them to be in high when that's actually really probably should be medium in terms of the actual risk.
We could look to extend that medium category.
Access daily by a very low number of people. Because there's a difference between small groups of people and a low number of people.
I think we probably need to add in small shop or something to that effect, just as a bit of an example for staff.
Yep.
So they don't just focus
or
on
small
twins.
business, maybe business.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's probably a better term because it's more likely
Yeah.
the scenario you've described. Yep. So once our staff establish those 2 components, they then come to this assessment table and look at what does that result in. For argument's sake, if we took a medium level of risk and a moderate consequence of failure, we'd end up in the centre here in the yellow with a score of 9. And then when we come down to this table, it would show us that a score of 9 would be we respond within 10 working days.
Yeah. So that's our response. Is that clear to those that are reading it? So we've got an assessment time frame, and then the next one under. So that's initial action will be taken. Mm-hmm. So what do we mean by initial action?
So that's our staff actually going out to site and doing their investigation to see what's going on.
So do we need to put that initial action by Selwyn District Council staff will be undertaken?
Yep.
Sorry, just before you edit that too far, Vanessa, is that not covered further up?
Under priorities for action, Council uses a matrix to determine the time frame within which the assessment will be completed based on the information known provided
Not
about
really.
the situation.
No.
Probably not clear to the public. Yeah.
It's not clear to the public. I guess we're writing this, Nathan, as much for the public as for you guys. because people are going to go to this if they know they've got an officer attending.
Yep. Yep.
Sorry.
Would it be better placed up here though, talking about that it's an action for us rather than under table 3?
Okay, that's an option. Yep. Mhm.
Priority. I'm just wondering whether it's the title that we change as
Yeah.
well.
Priorities for action by council.
Yeah. Might make it a whole lot clearer too, mightn't it? Because that applies to the whole section then.
Yep.
Cool. Happy to move on from there?
Yep. So we're going on to the interactions section. Is this under this? Speaker?
Just before we leave Melbourne Community Board, a couple of things that I picked up when John Very spoke yesterday. He talked about the MB diagram being clearer than ours. I've had a review of that. It is a very comprehensive diagram over 3 pages. And I think it probably sits best as public information on our website because our diagram is more driven at keeping the steps short and concise for the team to follow
Okay.
internally.
I'll let you make that call.
Okay.
You happy with that, Bob?
Yeah.
And timeframes was the other thing that he brought up. Once again, I think we can probably do something on our website around guidance for timeframes because they do vary for every case. So there's not one answer that we can hard code into the policy as such.
How does that leave clarity for the public?
So when we're having our ongoing discussions with building owners, we talk to them about timeframes because we've got to understand their situation and we've also got to look at what are the remedies. So if they have to do extensive work, we need to give them reasonable time to actually undertake that work.
Have we got words to that effect in the document anywhere?
There is, let me just find, because we did mention timeframes in one part. And just find it, here we go. So I've added in the word reasonable there as well because previously we'd talked about specific timeframes.
Yep. Okay.
It's more appropriate to say reasonable timeframes to
Right. Okay.
ensure that it's a two-way discussion. We fully understand
Yeah.
their position and act accordingly.
What about realistic? Is that not an important coined term? Because there's reasonable, but realistic brings in the likelihood of it being they're being able to source enough money and finances to achieve it within that certain time, or is reasonable encompass all of that?
Yeah,
Okay.
it does. And we use reasonable for the very fact that if we take anything to court, that's the term the courts use. The first
Yep.
thing they look at is have we afforded the individual reasonable time in which to effect the work.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you.
All right. If we move now to submission number 10, which was provided to us by Heritage New Zealand, Iri Tonga. Their submission was quite detailed and they actually on what page of the submission is that? 1, 2, 3. They've got a heading relief sought and they've actually detailed each clause by clause of the proposed changes. I've incorporated all of their changes. I didn't see any reason not to. It provides greater detail and makes sure we cover those heritage items far better. Do you want me to read through those?
Yeah, sure. I think it's good too.
Okay, so in the implementation of procedures under the Act with regards to dangerous, affected or insanitary buildings, Council will consider any historical or cultural aspects of the building and the need to facilitate the preservation of buildings of significant cultural, historical or heritage value. This will be achieved by A, recognising the range of heritage buildings that exist in the district, including those listed in the New Zealand Heritage List, which also comprises historic places, historic areas, waihe tapu, Waihitapuna and Waihitapu areas and other places identified by iwi as a place of cultural significance and scheduled in the district plan. B, consultation with owners and Heritage New Zealand Pahiritonga in relation to any proposed written notices requiring work. C, informing and involving relevant statutory organisations, including Heritage New Zealand Pahiritonga, with regard to any heritage building identified as at risk. D, considering heritage values and conservation best practice measures when developing and managing upgrading proposals. E, consideration of alternative methods to avoid unnecessary demolition of heritage buildings, including partial demolition, temporary propping, support of the structure, hoardings to resist access, and partial deconstruction to make safe and salvage materials.
Can I just interrupt there just quickly? If we go back up to the first bit, I just wanted some clarity around that, because they've talked about, it says including the range of heritage buildings that exist in the district, including those listed. Mm-hmm. So just confirming, anything that hasn't yet been earmarked as heritage, we will still give that the heritage consideration.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the extra piece we added above, supports that as well.
Brilliant.
They also proposed this new paragraph in regard to archaeological. So under the Heritage New Zealand Pahiritonga Act 2014, the permission of Heritage New Zealand Pahiritonga must be sought prior to the modification or destruction of any archaeological site, whether the site is unrecorded or has been previously recorded. An archaeological site is described in the Act as a place associated with pre-1900 human activity, which may provide evidence relating to the history of New Zealand. These may include buildings built prior to 1900. It is advised to seek further information from Heritage New Zealand Pahiritonga if this is anticipated.
So they specifically want to factor in anything built before 1900, but I would like to see that generally overall heritage is considered anything pre-1940, because we've got 1930s properties, which the arts and crafts movement, which are still very specifically important. So we haven't determined what we consider heritage in our document here, have we, to us?
No, we haven't. We've been relying on Heritage New Zealand as the experts in that field.
Yeah.
Sophie's just having a quick look at their Act, because I believe the archaeological part is specifically related to 1900 under the Act.
But as a council, we can determine, because you're familiar with the arts and crafts movement, aren't you, Bob? Of course he is. He's with wood. But the arts and crafts movement are very significant, and that's 1930s, 20s and 30s, very, very significant to heritage and general heritage properties. So I would like to see that our district gives weight to that.
Yep, so Sophie's just pulled up the legislation now, and in the interpretation it states archaeological site means any place in New Zealand, including any building or structure or part of a building or structure that, one, was associated with human activity that occurred before 1900, or is the site of the wreck of any vessel where the wreck occurred before 1900, and two, provides or may provide through investigation by archaeological methods evidence relating to the history of New Zealand. And B, includes a site for which declaration is made under Section 43.
So that's an archaeological site. Sorry, I was just referring to buildings as such.
It's the same.
Yeah, so that paragraph is...
It's the same, but Bob's saying that's the same. Archaeological site and heritage buildings are under the same, but you're saying this is archaeological site.
This paragraph is intended as archaeological only.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. So we'll carry on through. I'll come back to that because I'd like to see if we can give effect to that time, the eras.
Sure. So that actually brings us to the end of the Heritage New Zealand submission.
Oh, it does? Okay.
Last thing they had. And then we move into submitter number 11, which is the Public Health Service to Whakaora.
So before we leave the heritage then, is there anywhere in our heritage notification context where we can reference the areas of importance in terms of preservation?
I think it would be a separate paragraph in here,
Okay.
essentially to the effect of Selwyn District Council also values. How would you like to word it, Elizabeth?
Oh, Bob, help me with this.
Yeah.
All heritage properties, which include
Values.
up to the arts and crafts era, until the 1940s. When did the arts and crafts finish with that type of building, Bob?
I would leave
Not
the
era. ERA.
Sorry.
I would
Wrong era.
I would leave the arts and craft out.
My era.
Oh no, I think the arts and
Yeah.
crafts are really pertinent,
Because it's really got nothing to do with heritage as such.
but it needs to be. It is considered, arts and crafts is considered heritage in the UK, so I'd be surprised if it's not considered that here. Bob, yeah. I think that's good, don't you think, Bob? Because we've got some stunning arts and crafts around. I think we should be definitely protecting the arts and crafts era.
No, I'd still disagree.
He disagrees.
Yeah, I would leave the arts and craft out and leave the rest of it there. The properties up to the 1940s era.
Well,
It's,
I think we need to value them because that's 100 years ago now. Well, not quite, but it's coming up to. But we're going to, if we don't protect those, in another 20 years, they will be our heritage properties as well, and we'll have lost them. I think we should be forward thinking.
okay.
And just thinking, does future Selwyn actually help us with that?
Well, it just gives weight to heritage. So it's what we determine as heritage, and I'm saying let's be forward thinking. Then the UK arts and crafts is very important. Arts and crafts is a whole. It's a whole movement of a particular style of building. So if you're familiar with Art Deco and you're familiar with Napier, so the protection and the heritage value of that, it's putting that emphasis here. Whereas you see some councils don't give weight to that. And because Napier's, yes, Nathan, he's from the UK, isn't he?
I am actually, yeah. But what I was actually going to say, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to wait patiently. Was the risk of if you just include one specific type in terms of arts and crafts,
It does say
you run the risk of other. If you left it up to a time frame, say buildings up to 1940,
Yeah.
you're covering any other eras. If you
Yeah.
specify just arts and crafts buildings,
oh,
it could be seen as just arts and
yes,
crafts.
yes,
up to
no, sorry,
1940.
it was all buildings up into the 1940s, which does also include arts and crafts here. We don't have to put arts and crafts here in, but I just was
Yeah.
specifically using that as a point. Yeah. Man, when you say heritage built properties, it could just be heritage properties with significant features or with heritage important
Yeah,
features for the characteristics or something.
I'm happy with that as it sits.
Yeah. Okay.
And just one question too.
Until.
Yeah.
I need to
Into
spell
the-
that
into the
right.
1940s, yeah.
Until the 1940s.
So Selwyn District Council also values all heritage properties with important features, characteristics up until the 1940s.
Yeah. Because that does then, if we have some Napier style flat top 1920s, it includes them. Yes, absolutely anything that we should be preserving. I think we need to be very proactive in this space because we don't have a lot. So we need to protect our cob cottages all the way through.
Nice.
Great. Fantastic.
Okay.
All right. So now if
Yeah,
we
just one on the temporary propping. Is there any time on that, or is it you can leave it prop forever? Is that acceptable? How do you see that?
I think the earthquakes give us a pretty good insight into temporary propping.
Still a few out there 20
Quite a
years
few
later.
still out there. Yeah, so that would tie into timeframes in that as well. I mean, we've seen buildings like the cathedral that have had propping on them for many years now, and it'll still be there for many years to come. So, yeah, case by case.
Fantastic. Great.
Cool. All right, so if we move to submitter number 11 now, National Public Health Service, Te Whatu Ora. Their submission was quite extensive and quite challenging to put into words, to be fair. But under this new section 9, which I've titled Multi-Agency Coordination, I have tried to encompass the essence of what they've stated. So if I read that out to you, first paragraph is, in carrying out its obligations under the Building Act, the Council will work proactively with Heritage New Zealand, Pauhere Tonga, Fire and Emergency New Zealand, the New Zealand Police, Health New Zealand, Te Whatu Ora, and other relevant agencies to achieve a coordinated multi-agency approach to ensure building owners, residents and any affected community are provided with the appropriate support. In cases where infirmed, neglected or vulnerable persons, as defined by Section 126 of the Health Act 1956, are involved, or a nuisance as defined under Section 29 of the Health Act exists, Council will work closely with support agencies and the Medical Officer of Health in respect of cleansing orders and abatement notices, closing orders and committal orders issued under Sections 41 and 42 of the Health Act 1956. Council recognises that best practice, particularly in insanitary conditions, requires a multi-agency response to support the health and welfare of individuals to ensure they can remain living as independently as possible without compromising their personal health or the health of the public. Such response may extend to other healthcare providers and services, such as general practitioners, health of older persons services and or mental health service providers and relevant community support organisations. So if I just pause there on those 3 paragraphs, any feedback?
I'm really satisfied with that. I think that's fantastic, and I think I love that we've put in there to ensure that they can remain living as independently as possible without compromising their personal health or the health of the public. I guess the only issue I have is we don't yet, as a public reading this, we don't really have a lot of understanding of the level of risk we are allowing people to be in, because obviously something, for example, like mould spores, I mean, this has got to be the dampest, mouldiest country in the world, and everyone's going to have some little bit of mould in a corner somewhere, as to what that level is that people will be deemed is unacceptable. And I think this is where do we give effect to the fact that we there's got to be a level of compromise somewhere, I guess, is the concern, because we're saying without compromising their personal health, but we're taking away that choice a little bit from them. If we're telling them what we deem is acceptable, there's got to be a level where, yes, we state this is beyond that level.
And that's actually why we bring in these professionals. So, as I stated earlier, the threshold for us to determine an insanitary building is very high, and just a little bit of mould in your bathroom or that wouldn't qualify. The situations that we're going into where we're having to bring in the Medical Officer of Health or a contractor food and health that specialise in the Health Act, they're severe situations.
Can we put the words in here that it recognises that there's without severely compromising their personal health then?
I think the wording there, at the start of that 3rd paragraph, Council recognise that best practice. So if there are circumstances where there was somebody who, for various reasons, did need to stay in their home and it did compromise their health to some extent or to a small extent, the best practice means that we could depart from the best practice if there was that good reason.
Yep.
So again, I think I would recommend against being overly specific, because the best practice says
Fair
that
enough.
we can exercise our discretion. Obviously, we would take the advice of the experts.
I guess I'm just looking at it as the public looking at this document and thinking, how prescriptive is this? To give them the sense that it is only under quite severe conditions. There isn't anything in here that really paints that picture. And can we add something to do that, or are we just going to leave it as it is?
I think my preference would be to leave it as is. I think there's definitely some public information that we could put on our website to help people understand that this isn't an everyday thing that we pick up this piece of policy and apply it.
Yep.
And certainly when we get to reporting, earlier we discussed the submission that suggested the annual report. If
Yes.
that's publicly available on the website, people will see that we're dealing with a handful of these each year. It's, I don't think we've done more than 5 or 6 in any calendar year that I've been here at council.
Okay. You happy with that, Bob? Yep. Right. Okay, let's carry on.
So they had also commented on working with the fire service, which we've already addressed under section 9. And they, in point 22 of their submission, they talked about council staff such as environmental health officers. So we actually don't have any in-house environmental health officers. We contract out to Food and Health Standards to help us in that situation. So I haven't specifically identified them in the document for the very reason if our contract changes at any point, it affects our policy.
But we don't need to. You don't feel the need to put environmental health officers in that.
I don't think so. No. The other couple of sentences that we had on the end of that multi-agency support was council will provide guidance, support and where applicable access to funding mechanisms, rates relief and heritage grants to assist owners in remedying issues, and in cases of hardship council will consider extended compliance timeframes or support services to avoid disproportionate impact on vulnerable individuals or property owners.
Brilliant. Oh, that's fantastic. Happy with that, Bob?
So that brings us to the end of the submissions. Just a couple of other changes that I made was I moved the record keeping piece down to the bottom of the document so that we had all of the key action items up front.
Yep. Was there any changes to the limb report, the one on the limbs?
No, I just left it word for word. The only reason it's in green is the fact I've moved it down in the order.
Okay.
So originally I think it was point number 9 from memory.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I think that's it from me at this or add to.
Anything you want to add, Bob?
Just on number 30.
2030. February 2030. Next reviewed on or required before February 2030. Fantastic job, and it encompasses what the direction that we need to go as a council and brings a lot in. Sophie, isn't it? Oh, I'm so bad with names. Sophie, you're happy with this document? Great. Vanessa, everybody, Nathan, you're good? Bob, happy? Everyone's happy? Right, done.
Fantastic.
Right, go back to my front page.
Yep, so it'll just be the recommendations.
Ending. So, would you like to move it, Bob?
I'll move that we accept.
Move it. Fantastic. Done. And